Hello, and welcome to Happy Sherpa, where we meet entrepreneurs, financiers, explorers, and scientists who dare to question the world, step off the beaten track, and show us ways forward. In today's episode, Lenny Kessler receives Christian Clot, explorer, author, and founder of the Human Adaptation Institute. Hello, Christian. Welcome to Happy Sherpas. We're very happy to have you here today. You have spent more than 20 years exploring some of the most extreme environments on Earth: deserts, jungle, polar regions, not for the sake of achievement, but to understand how humans adapt when their reference points collapse. Christian, may I ask you to present yourself and tell us your story?
Yes, thank you. I'm very pleased to be here. So I'm Christian Clot, and I'm the director and founder of the Human Adaptation Institute, meaning that main job is to try to understand scientifically how people adapt to new kind of situations. So might be in an environment like a desert or a rainforest or whatever, but mainly about what we are living right now in our Earth, about climate change, about new technologies, about new geopolitics. Finally, maybe the extreme word is not in a desert or rainforest, but mainly in just our life.
Thank you. So with this is a whole challenge to change the whole life, as you're mentioning. So what I think is interesting is this idea that human can adapt to the environment, and you're mentioning that our life might be extreme. So maybe there are two questions there. Where do you define the extreme in adaptation? And how much is it for the human to adapt in there?
Well, consider the extreme environments depending on the person who live this condition. I mean, if you take a person living in Greenland and going to hunt in the middle of the Greenland area, it's not an extreme place. It's maybe like his or her office, you know. But you take a person living in Paris and you put these persons in Greenland in minus 40 degrees suddenly. It's completely impossible for these persons to survive here. So it's completely extreme for these persons. So we always have to consider extreme situation depending of where do you come from, who you are, what is your training. And that is so important to consider these kind of things because it's the same in our life right now. I mean, you have people who really like crisis. You know, they are like a fish in the bowl. Wow, it's marvelous. I have to fight something. I have to do things. And other people need more calm, you know, and being in a situation they have all the mastering of the situation. So the question is who you are and who you are to face what kind of crisis. It's all the question about adaptation.
Thank you. That's very clear. The question we go through on this podcast is obviously adaptation. In what you just mentioned, it seems that humans can be adapted to very different environments, but can they adapt to a new environment?
That's all the question. If you consider the story of human beings since long time ago, yes, we adapt us in quite every kind of environment. We have no base in Antarctica, which were completely impossible just maybe 100 years ago, you know. So yes, we live in Antarctica, we live in Africa, we live in rainforest, we live underwater sometimes. So if we look at that, we say, wow, human can adapt to quite anything. But it's not so true, in fact, because what is adaptation? Firstly, is an equilibrium, a balance. If you take too much thing to adapt yourself, once you will lose something. It's all a question of balance. So if to adapt yourself in the conditions, you use too much energy or too much fuel or too much whatever, once suddenly there's no more energy, no more fuel, and you will fail down. So we can't consider that we can adapt to anything. As a human species, maybe, but as a society, we have to consider what is the energy, what is the money, what is the risk of losing people if we have to adapt to new conditions. And considering the future now, yes, we will adapt in a way, but if we consider just the climate, if we have a world at plus 50 degrees Celsius, we won't be adaptable. It's impossible.
Thank you. I hear there that we have limits on extreme adaptation. I hear we have limits also on the cost and the resources needed. You mentioned also when we were preparing, there were psychology costs to this adaptation. Maybe which one is the most prevalent? Which one is the most key for us when we have a relatively short term to adapt to a new world and not, generations?
Well, the history shows us that every big societies fall down in just some years because suddenly some event came too fast for people to adapt. So we have to question that. Why suddenly civilization like Angkor, like Petra, like Machu Picchu fell down in just 1, 2, or 3 years suddenly because of climate change, because of war, because of new technologies? Because the change came too fast. So we can adapt to a lot of things, but we need some time to do it if we're not prepared enough before the adaptation situation. That is the key here, time. Then you have a really important thing is that whatever is the adaptation reason for, humans are inside and involved. So you can't create adaptation thinking, okay, I will adapt a wall, I will adapt the technology, I will adapt the way of working maybe, without considering what is the impact for human being. Because they have to change their behavior when you change something. Whatever is the reason for adaptation, human has to change. So you have two kinds of adaptation here. You have an adaptation because things change or you put a change in place and you need to find solutions. It's mainly the way we adapt right now. Or maybe we can also decide a change. So I can prepare myself a bit better. I can anticipate. I can decide what I will do. And that is the best way to adapt. But right now, as human beings, we always wait to have a reason as a crisis to adapt ourselves.
That's really interesting to start moving before the crisis. So in your research, are there some psychological motivations that we can actually maybe activate to have people start this change and maybe adapt in a direction that is easier?
There's a question of cost in adaptation. Cost about the money you need, cost about the first equipment you need, cost about time, all that is normal. But you have also a brain cost in adaptation. Meaning that if you want to change, whatever is a reason for changing, but if you want to change, you will need to change things in your brain. Maybe create new neurons, new synapses, new connections, understanding differently the things. All that is an energy demanding in the brain. And we are talking about neuroeconomy, meaning that if you want to change, you need to provide an effort. So it's a cost. And why do you provide this cost? Why are you ready to put an energy, a cost, for something you don't understand, for example, or for something you don't want to? So we are here understanding that for helping people to change, they need a reason that is enough interesting for the brain to accept the effort of the changes. And that is so important to understand that. You can't sell to someone something crap for the future and hoping that these people will do a hard work to change. So you need to consider what is the benefit of the transformation. How can I tell people, okay, guys, you will spend time, you will give some effort, you have to change things you love to create something new. But at the end of the day, you will have that. And it's enough interesting for you so you accept all the effort to have it.
Thank you. I'd like to dig slightly more on that question because I think it's really interesting. We often have people, explaining, especially in the sustainability world, that the end of the world is coming. It's +4 degrees tomorrow. The water will cover the whole island, whatever. And thinking, because this is the alternative, you need to change. And what you're saying, if I understand correctly, is this rational logic is not hitting my brain. My brain needs something more positive to change, which is very close to us on this podcast. Since it's Happy Sherpa, we need to find something positive. And in what I hear, the brain also needs to find something positive. Am I understanding correctly there?
Yes, it's in a way exactly that. And it might be, wow, shit. So there's a reality is that climate change is coming and heat is coming. And maybe if we don't do nothing, we will fall down. And it's true. But if we do nothing, this will be really, really difficult to tackle the situation. Yet, unfortunately, an information is not enough to push people to change. An information is just something that the brain will treat, and that's all. To change and to push people to change, you need an emotion. Every changing decisions are based on an emotion. So the only question is, what is the emotion you need to activate in a person to push this person to change? And that is really different here. That means that you need a thing that is not so easy. You need to be interesting to the person. You need an interest for the person. You need to understand what is your emotion. What are you feeling right now? What is your emotion for tomorrow? And so I can activate things because I understand you. You are not just one number and another number over, and I will put a transformation, and you have to tackle the transformation. Whatever you are, whatever you believe, it's not my problem. My challenge is here, you are a number, change. Do you think it will work? We know that it doesn't work like that. So yes, we need these emotions and to understand what is the emotion for you. But of course, if you have a society, if you have a company, you can't think, okay, we have this emotion for this person, this emotion for that person. You need a focus emotion that can tackle everybody. So all the question is, what is the link between all the persons you need to change in the same moment?
I love it. So now we need leaders that becomes basically neuropsychologists and all read Kahneman. And so that's really interesting. First, it brings two questions. One, emotion for the whole company, if that is what the leaders need to design and work towards. How can they do that practically?
To consider what is the reality of a human being, what can a human understand? I was in a society some years ago, and they had a huge problem, and they needed to change a lot of things, and mainly they needed money. And the leader of the society came on stage with all the persons. There were more than 40,000 persons in the stadium, and he came on stage and tell people, guys, I have goals for everybody here. We will make $10 billion next year. And you have 40,000 people in the stadium watching that, doing nothing, not applauding, not nothing, because it's not something you can understand. It's ununderstandable for everybody, $10 billion. What is the meaning of that? So first of all, you need change that are meaningful for people. What will they gain in the change? Why? Maybe you have to change the way you work. So, okay, I will accept that, but because I have something at the end and it touched myself. And you need a really important thing that is so rare right now is exemplarity. Who will you follow? A person who tells you a lot of things but doing nothing, or people who are with you in the field, trying things, accepting that sometimes we are wrong, taking decisions, trying things. Maybe it will work, it won't work. Okay, we try another thing, but I'm here with you in the field. That is absolutely a key thing here, exemplarity.
Exemplarity is not something we can buy. If I want to change, I buy a new machine, it's done. In what you're saying, I need time. I need time to position myself, or a leader will need time to position himself as someone whom we can trust, someone who's leading the way you're mentioning. Plus, adaptation is also probably something that is not always that easy quickly. So how do you integrate this notion of time into what you just mentioned?
Well, firstly, the first thing you said is you can't buy exemplarity, and you can't buy the cost benefit in the brain. All that is a perfect human being situation. So adaptation is not something you can buy. It's something you offer to people. And each person has to understand why it has to change. And yes, after that, when you have this acceptation, which is focus, a really important thing, you can't change if you don't accept the reason you have to change for. Then you will have to transform things. And do you really think you can transform your brain, your way of working, your way of understanding situations in a minute? It never works. So yes, adaptations take time, and you have to accept that if you want to change, deeply something, you will need time, maybe a month, maybe a year, maybe a 10 year, depending on the kind of changes. But for sure, at the very beginning of the situation, you have persons who are absolutely unaware of what they will live in the future, and they will begin a journey to change something, which is a long way, whatever it is. And there is interesting because, you know, you have two ways to change. The first one is what we so much like. We wait for a crisis. And then a crisis came. Okay, we know we have the reason to change. The famous cost benefit in the brain is really clear. The benefit of our effort is to get out of the crisis. Easy. So it's why we so like crisis, because it's an easy way to understand we have to change. But of course, when you have a crisis, you destroy things, you lose things. And even in a crisis, when the crisis occurs, you will accept the situation, will try to do something, but after that, we have to fix the situation and to repair it. And it takes time. And in fact, much more time to repair a crisis than to decide to change. And that is the second way to change an adaptation, is to decide something. And when you are a leader right now, in our days, you need to take decisions. So much leaders, so much government wait for situation to act. But if you want to adapt and to create something without destroying things, you need to take decisions. And these decisions is, of course, something you will have to engage yourself in and to help people to transform them. And then you will have to accept that, okay, this is the point of start. I take the decision here, and how many times do I need to put in place all my transformation? What we know now as a scientific behavioral situation is that roughly when a person accepts the situation, he will have a first 40 days to begin to change things in their life, in their behavior, in the situation. Then it will be like waves, you have a lot of 40 days situations, but the first one is to understand that, okay, at the very beginning of a situation, I will put a lot of energy to understand it. I will have a lot of interest. I will try things. I will take decisions. But then my brain is tired because he uses a lot of energy. So he needs some rest. We call that like apathy situation. It doesn't mean you are in depression, it doesn't mean you are unable, but you are in a way that the brain needs to stop a bit, to take some step back, on the situation and to wait a bit to create neurons, synapses that take a lot of energy. And then you have to get out of this apathy situation. And there is very interesting because there's only one thing to push people out of an apathy situation. It's wonderness. Pleasure. You need to feel that there's something very nice and interesting to push yourself to the next phases, which is the constriction phases, to get to the adaptation situation. So you need emotions, but more than that, you need pleasure.
Deciding in a very uncertain world is not that easy. You're bringing ideas that not only do I need to decide, but I also need to accept the time it will take. I suppose it needs also a lot of accompanying all these people, the people who are under your responsibility, whether you're a government, a leader in a business, whatever position. How do you have an advice to help get started? Both deciding in this uncertain world, I have no idea what to do, where to go, but also how do I help these people go through these 40-day cycles and not lose faith in the meantime?
Well, there's two very important things before going on the journey of adaptation. If you have time, if it's not a crisis, and I hope you will change a lot of few things without crisis because it's much easier, is first of all, do I have the brain diversity? And my team have the brain diversity, meaning that we are not just focusing on a thing and we know just to do one thing and we have one ability, but you have a brain ability for a lot of different kind of things. You are ready to tackle different things. You are ready to try new things, to test new things. So for that, First of all, you need to understand where is your team considering the adaptation abilities. We have, for example, in my institute developed an analysis to understand what is the level of capacity of adaptation of a team. So if you have a team, everybody is really ready to change, really adaptable. If you go too slow, it won't work because people are eager to try things and they will be frustrated if nothing happens. But in another way, you have people who are absolutely unable to understand why we have to change. They are in a really low level of adaptation capacity. If you go too fast, it won't work. So first of all, what is the level of your team about adaptation? We can measure that. Then you will prepare your change and decide that we will go step by step here and here and here, and we will create the diversity in the brain of the persons. For that, you need to train them, you need to form them, and it's not a formation on Excel, Word, or whatever. It's a formation of how your brain accepts changes, and you can also train people for that. When you have that, when you have prepared your team with that, you can do any kind of changes, any kind of changes. And you need also to understand what I call the triangle of decision. What is the speed of your decision? I mean, if you are really up of the triangle, the triangle is a question of time on decision. So if something happened, like an avalanche falling down, it's easy to understand that you will shoot to people, hey guys, run in the left. And nobody will sit down and say, maybe we have to talk about that. No, people will accept your decision. But if you are in an office, in a peace way, and nothing happening, and you shoot, hey guys, we have to go left, nobody will understand. So you have also to consider where I am in the triangle of the decision. How fast do I have to put in place something? And as a leader, you have to always know, do I have to take a decision myself in 1 second? Or do I have the time to consult everybody and to decide with everybody? Need to understand that for going on leading an adaptation.
Great. What I hear is the leader is kind of a superhuman because there's this group that you want to bring, but there's also a transformation on yourself because a lot of people will either be extremely quick and like to take quick decisions, other might be slower and consultative in style. So what you're saying is almost that they should reinvent their style of leadership.
Completely. First of all, we have to accept that as leaders, we don't have to be alone. That's so important here. I mean, if you're alone and if you have to take all the decisions, you have also to consider that you are also a human being and you have also to adapt yourself. You may be a very good person at adaptation. There are 5-10% of the population we can call perfectly adaptable to quite everything. But they are rare, these persons, and not all of them are leaders. Then you have all the rest of the population that need time to adapt. And it's normal. And it's a good thing in a way, because you need also to understand why you are doing things. So there, as a leader, you have to accept that sometimes it's not you who has to be at the lead. And you may have also to give the lead to other persons. If we take again the example of a mountain, you have rocky place, snowy place, icy place. Maybe you are the best in the world for the rocky place, but you are a crap in the icy place. So you need another person to take the lead during the icy part. It's okay. At the very moment where you understand that and you give the leadership to another person and you get back the leadership when you are again in a situation you understand it's okay. You can be very tired because it's tiring to adapt. So again, you need to have some help here. And so you have to create a team where you know where are your help. And I really consider, I'm quite sure that it's really hard to scientifically prove it, that adaptation is mainly a collective thing and a cooperation thing. You can't adapt by yourself alone. You need people surrounding you. You need other way of thinking. You need, because we know we need a brain diversity to change. You also need a diversity in your team surrounding you, because when you are facing a new situation, if you have all the same way of thinking, coming from the same school, the same knowledge, you don't have nothing to try to find a new way. But if you have persons coming from some different school, different experiences, different country, different way of thinking, you always have someone who will raise his hand I have an idea. Then is the question, are you okay to listen to the idea or not? And if you want to adapt a team, a company, or whatever, you need to listen to the ideas.
Unfortunately, I don't know that many leaders who will correspond to your definition. I feel also, at least in the business world, there might be a real tension between competitiveness and not only competitiveness in terms of market positioning, etc., but also in the way the leaders were trained in our business schools to, basically be the alpha dominant in the room. And what you're just describing is learning to be an alpha that actually delegates and listens, which is almost antinomic, even though we know a few. But what is your take on this tension?
Well, we have to accept that we are human beings, but we have really good qualities and also really strong disabilities. And we all have that. And plus, you are also human beings, so you are sometimes tired, and sometimes you are under crisis yourself, and all that will create something really disengaging in your brain to try to adapt yourself. So yes, that's a big challenge. So maybe schools have also to change a bit the way we train the leaders. I don't mean that you have to be what we may call a weak leader, saying that each decision you will wait for other persons to take it for you. There's some leaders that are discussing everything because they are not okay to take the decision on what is the impact of the decision. So they think that if they take all the decision all together, they are not so much involved in the decision. It's an easy way to do things. It doesn't work at all. So yes, as a leader, you need to take decision. And as I say, it's a question of triangles. Sometimes I have to take the decision solo in a really hard way, and sometimes I have time to consult and to talk with everybody. But at the end of the day, you are the person who has to take decisions, but also, and that is the main point here, to help people to accept this decision. And more the people will accept your decision, more you will be easy in the transformation way. So I think this idea of an alpha leader, really strong, and beating others, and maybe also marching on the feet or whatever, is not working anymore. It's an illusion. It may give the illusion of adaptation because you are strong and you are stronger and will beat others. But at the end, adaptation is a question of balance. If you destroy one part of the balance, you may think you are strong for a time, but it will miss sometimes and it will fall down. And it's exactly why civilization fall down. They are too much strong. They think they have all the power. They take too much energy, too much material, too much equipment to everybody else, and suddenly there's nothing more to take. So if you want to go a good leader, to be a good leader in adaptation way, if you want to be a good leader considering the climate change, considering all the changes we are tackling now, you need to accept the balance.
Thank you. And this brings me to maybe one of the last questions. I also have a balance in the number of decisions or size of the decisions I can take. From what I hear, because adaptation is also a cognitive cost and a timely cognitive cost, I can't ask people to adapt to everything at the same time. So how do you choose it? Do you go one after the other one? Do you sequence them?
What is the new conditions now is that we are always adapting we are always into some situation, being ready to adapt to others, finishing another adaptation. We are always in a different kind of adaptation. That is really hard. And I think now that even more, we have 10, 20, 30 adaptations in the same time, which is really, really challenging right now. And it's a big issue to try to understand where I have to put my effort. So there's a thing really, really hard to do for leaders, but for everybody, is to have some rest for the brain. Our brain is receiving a lot of information every day, more than 3,000 main information every day, when we received only 10 or 20 just 200 years ago. So we have to treat each of these information. The brain can't decide, this information I put away, this information I will treat it. No, the brain receives an information, it treats it. After the treatment, it decides, okay, it's important or unimportant. But the time of treatment is there. So each information you have to take time to understand what it is. So it's really, really a lot of things to deal with for the brain. It won't work if you don't take some rest, some step back. And there is maybe the biggest challenge about adaptation is to accept that sometimes you have to do nothing and you receive a lot of information telling you have to go fast, you have to change fast, you have to do this and that and that. And if you try, it will maybe work for some time, but it will not work forever. It will fall down. So yes, you have to take decisions about what is the more important transformation you need, and you have to take rest for yourself and for your team, and you have to be a good leader and whatever. So yes, you need to be quite a superman or a superwoman, but it's true for everybody now. And I think that means we have to work on two things as society and not as a company or as a person. First thing is time issue. Do we pursue this constant acceleration, which is so bad for the brain? Or are we able to decide we have to step back a bit and to take a bit more time? Gen AI are an awfulness, not because they are able or not to do things, but because they push us again one more time to accelerate. So I think that a lot of persons now, more than 80% of the population, the world populations, say that they don't have enough time in their life. Meaning that people understand now that there's a really, really big focus on something. So I think we should, on this consideration, take time to decide at what speed do we want to go for the information, for work, for our main life. And yes, we have a lot of things to tackle with climate change, but if we try to go too fast, it won't work. So time is the first thing we have to consider as a society. And the second thing is school, education, because there's no way to adapt the population if they are not, again, ready to be adaptable. So they have the diversity in the brain, they have the knowledge that they need others, they have the knowledge that emotions are so important, so you have to accept your emotions. And if you have that, cooperation, acceptation of your emotion, time, consideration, you will be better to be adapted.
Thank you very much. It reminds me, my first boss, who was an incredible mentor, taught me almost from the beginning, the hardest thing in a job is to do nothing.
Yes.
Thank you, Christian, because, I think we often look at adaptation from a very technical point of view, and we forget that all these models, machines, whatever, are at the service of human beings. And the human beings, we tend to forget they are there, or we are there. So changing the education system will also probably take a bit of time, I guess. we can start tackling it, or actually hope the leaders in charge will listen to you and start tackling this. And I come out of our discussion very optimistic, because if what will move us is a sense of joy and happiness, you're leading us towards a very bright future. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.